Plants vs. Zombies. Go check out the PopCap site. That's a game coming out very soon, and that is catchy as hell. In the meantime... Yes, indeed, folks. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Now, topic for the day. Interesting thing that I was thinking about personally, and that's the fact that I haven't played WoW, like, in a week, yeah? Which is unusual. I haven't logged in for anything, mainly because we've had a few issues with, like, Arcanist Belt. Like, people have been off and around the place, so we're going to be recruiting a whole bunch more people. So pretty much everyone that's signed up to recruit on the website, we're going to say, come on in-game. And we're going to be sending out some replies shortly to indicate who can come along and start leveling up. We're kind of like a second wave of players. And I haven't raided with my guild, like my main guild this week either, just like, I don't see the point. I've mostly got best in slot, yeah? I really do. Almost all of my gear is best in slot. Some of it's like as close as it's going to get without me like giving a damn. It's like, for instance, let's see. I have a titanium spell shot ring, which I could replace with the Kirin Tor band, and it would be like a 0.5 DPS upgrade for me. So what's the point? Now, it's as close as it's going to get. So, I don't see the point in really raiding right now. To be honest, I got on board of raiding months ago. The current raid content has been lackluster for that reason. So, I came to thinking today, while I was kind of going through my finances and working out what I can cut out and what I can keep just to try and save some more money, I was looking at my WoW subscription, I'm like, well, why exactly do I have this again? Because, to be honest, over the past month, I don't think I've really got a lot out of it. And it got me to thinking, what's a reasonable expectation for £8.99 or $15 a month? What do we expect as players? Now, of course, the technical answer to this is, for your $15 a month, you don't get anything other than the right to play the game. Yeah, you get to play on the game subject to their rules. That's the technical answer. But as always, technical answers are generally not good enough to actually deal with the debate, and indeed are actually a cop-out in many respects. There's a good article on this, actually. If you go and look on bbc.co.uk/news, there's a great article about how numbers don't win arguments anymore. And that's quite relevant to your interests, I would think. Go read it. Anyway. The wider issue is exactly how reasonable an expectation we as a player base can have that our $15 a month is going to entitle us to something. Now, entitled players are, of course, a very dangerous thing. We see a lot of them. A lot of players, since indeed the dawn of WoW itself, have said that their $15 a month has entitled them to all manner of things, and in fact, concessions have been made to these players, and it's a terrible thing. It's horrible. A lot of bad things have happened to the game as a result of making concessions to entitled casuals and stuff like that. However, I think everyone has a little bit of entitlement in them somewhere, however much you want to admit it. If you don't play the game at all, then you'll be thinking, well, I've really wasted my money here by paying a subscription for a game I don't play. Now, of course, the counter-argument to that would be that you have the right to play the game and it's your prerogative to do it. Yeah, you're the one who generates the enjoyment out of the game. There was a very, very good comparison, actually. I was reading earlier an article on Goonfleet's wiki for EVE, because I've gotten into EVE quite a bit lately, and they compared basically WoW and EVE Online, and they came to the conclusion both were good, but they were both different things. Now, they came to the conclusion that EVE Online was a playground, whereas WoW was a theme park. The difference between the two was this: they're both fun. However, in a playground, they provide you with some equipment, and you are basically left to your own devices to make your own fun. And some kids don't do so well in playgrounds, some do. It depends. A theme park, they build the rides, and then you basically queue up to get on them, And the fun provided is a kind of pre-laid out experience. Now, some people may enjoy it more than others, but the fun is going to be delivered in exactly the same way. Your reaction to it, of course, varies from person to person. I thought that was quite a nice comparison, because that is what WoW is like, and that is indeed what EVE is like. EVE has very little in terms of direction, and that's something that some players have a lot of problem with, and it's probably why the game hasn't taken off as much as it has. It's very niche, but it is, for those who have some creativity and the drive to actually get somewhere, it is an incredibly diverse game. Whereas WoW provides all of these fun rides, and it gives a very linear path. It's like going around the theme park on a one-way street, as it were. You're going for the end, you're going to the kind of destination as opposed to the journey, whereas EVE is the other way around. It's the journey as opposed to the destination, with a series of pit stops along the way for various different player-created goals. Now, neither of these games are either better than the other or worse than the other as a result of this. This is just simply two different ways of playing. And indeed, I subscribe to both games. I enjoy both games on different levels. So, I suppose the question then becomes, if Blizzard provides all of these rides, etc., and you are visiting this theme park on a daily basis, then, and say you basically have a season ticket to this theme park, how many times do you get to visit the theme park until you think, well, is my season ticket really going towards anything good? Is there any point in me continuing to go forward? And at what point must it be the player's responsibility to create this enjoyment, to find this enjoyment, and when they're not finding the enjoyment, to exercise their right to walk away? And at what point is it Blizzard's responsibility to provide more and more content to keep them enjoying this particular theme park? Now, one of the interesting things about WoW versus single-player games, and I think this is something that prevents one from making a proper comparison between MMOs and, say, single-player or generic multiplayer titles. I have this kind of system that I work by when it comes to value, and a lot of the time it's a little bit optimistic, let me put it that way. I buy my games, like PC games, generally between £25 and £30. That's how much they cost in this country. That's for a new PC game. Now, for every pound I spend, I expect an hour of enjoyment. Now, some people would argue, of course, that that is unreasonable, and they might be right, but that's the kind of level that I look at. It's not always the case, because sometimes there are games that simply are just absolutely stellar, to the point of being, well, the time that I spent, the quantity of time, was not as important to me as the quality of time. Indeed, that's the argument that a lot of people made for, say, Bioshock or Mirror's Edge, which are both quite short games with basically zero replayability, that the quality of the time was worth more than the quantity. Now, that argument works in single-player titles because you're basically playing through a finite story from beginning to end. Repetition doesn't really come into it, at least if it's a good title. In MMOs, repetition always comes into it, whether or not it be in a pseudo-disguised form, in the form of quests which are basically the same damn thing over and over again, or whether or not it be in endgame, where you're basically doing the same dungeon week in, week out, over and over and over again. Now at that point you have to look at where the enjoyment's coming from, and indeed how much Blizzard is responsible for providing that enjoyment and how much we are responsible. I think raiding in particular, the endgame content and indeed PvP content is not quite the same thing. And if you look at PvP content, you can compare PvP content in its current form to deathmatch play. Yeah? Deathmatch play has quite a bit of replayability because the players that you play against change the experience. Yeah? You're still in a finite environment with set predefined rules. Yeah? You can't simply create another gun out of nowhere. You can only run at a certain speed, you can only fire at a certain speed, different weapons do different amounts of damage. All of this is predefined. The same with stuff like Counter-Strike. The roles and how you win in or lose in a particular map are predefined. But going up against different teams indicates having different strategies, so it keeps things varied. So the PvP side of the game, you could safely say, has replayability, but the PvE side doesn't, which is kind of odd because that is something that people play a lot of. We repeat PvE week in, week out. Now you've got to ask yourself why, because a PvE encounter, at least in the current form of WoW, and I do hope this does change in the future, does not have a sufficient AI to change on a week-to-week basis. It cannot adapt to players' tactics, it cannot vary what it does. Everything is absolutely predictable. Now, why do we do that? I suppose the answer to that, at least from my perspective, is there's two things which keep driving you to do this. If you were doing this on a week in, week out basis without any other people, then there is no way, absolutely no way, at least in my opinion, that anyone would do it. You'd have to be a masochist. It's ridiculous. But if you do it with a group of people that you like, and you have a bit of fun, you have a laugh, then it becomes a social experience. It's like going to the pub, yeah? Going to the pub is not inherently enjoyable, and indeed, you're going to the same pub, you're drinking the same drinks. You might even be seeing the same people, but what you do at the pub, and what you do when you're socialising with people at the pub, is, and can change every time. So basically, it's not where you are, but who you're with that actually gives you that sense of enjoyment. And the second option, of course, is the fact that they're dangling rewards in front of your face. The metagame of min-maxing your character is enjoyable. And while you may only be able to get 1 or 2 pieces per run, there is enjoyment to be had there, and it can make the experience worthwhile. It's that, the argument you can make there, is for people that go and do all of the additional kind of content in single-player games and acquire, like, the uber-powerful weapons and stuff like that. It's like, say, Final Fantasy VII, killing Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon, yeah? What was the point? Well, it's for min-maxers. It's for people that want that kind of thing. Now, there was a similar thing in Dragon Quest VIII, which was a very good RPG. I played 100 hours of this game. This game is awesome. You should play it. If you have a PlayStation 2 and you don't have Dragon Quest VIII, then I must ask why? Why? Go get it. It's amazing. It's the best RPG that Square Enix has put out in like the last 5 years, easily. Why exactly? I must ask you. Because I don't understand it. Is this last part of Dragon Quest VIII in the game? And by this last part of Dragon Quest VIII, I mean there's a final dungeon that you can access, but only after beating the game, which rewards some unique items. What's the point? Because it's at the end of the game, yeah? None of these will help you whatsoever. Indeed, there's also a bunch of monsters that you can get for your monster team only after you've beaten the game. But there's no point in replaying any of that stuff, because by the time you get there, you've beaten it all. Like, you've beaten the monster team thing. You've done everything in the arena. You've got the best gear. Why do you want better gear when there's nothing to use it on? Well, some people actually enjoy that. It's the same as... Well, it's sort of the same, yeah? Why do you want to get gear, say, at the end of an expansion pack, yeah? What was the motivation to get gear in Naxxramas once you'd beaten Naxxramas? What was the motivation to get gear in Sunwell once you'd beaten Sunwell? Or indeed any of the other stuff? If you get to the end of the expansion, what's the motivation? Yeah, people still want the best gear. They still want it, even though they know it's useless. It's like they've already beaten everything with their current gear. Why would they want better? Because some people do that. Some people do take on the idea of min-maxing your character and taking pride and taking enjoyment in that. as a part of the game. And that's something that they can do, if they choose. Well, the question then becomes, does Blizzard have to provide this constant stream of content to justify this $15 a month? As if we conclude that repetition is acceptable in a PvE environment, then the question then has to become how much? How much repetition is acceptable? When do we get to the point, like say right now, do you think we're at that point right now? Because I kind of do. That we've got to a stage where we haven't had any new content for like 5 months. And the content that we did have got beaten very fast. And we haven't had anything left. I mean, bear in mind that since Wrath launch, if you're in the US, you've spent $75, which is, I believe, double the price of what you paid for Wrath of the Lich King initially, in order to continue to play the game. That's how much you've spent. So you're going to ask yourself why. Why do you do that? It's difficult to argue, at least at this point, that $15 a month for the current state of the game is kind of worthwhile, because it's different to, say, games like EVE Online and Sandbox stuff, whereby you're basically paying $15 a month to get access to this playground, and the content in the game can constantly shift thanks to players, whereas the content in the game in WoW can't shift as a result to players, which is why I believe that WoW actually has to bring in more content and has to inject more content on a more regular basis because of that. You've got so many players that have reached the end game and are basically being drip-fed and they're waiting for their next meal. And repetition is only going to get you so far. Having said that, of course, WoW, and indeed most MMOs, is really entirely what you make of it. There are some players who really do not care about progression or anything like that and just want to socialise with people, and that's fine. However, we have a very large player base here, and while the social aspect is always part of the game, its severity and the degree of its importance varies from player to player, and you do have to try and cater to more of your audience than just those who like to sit around in Orgrimmar chatting and bouncing around on their mounts. So, do I feel like I'm getting my money's worth? At the moment, no, but I think that WoW comes in peaks and troughs, and I am glad to say that I can just cancel my account. And I think there's actually not all that many people that really do this, and it's very odd. Just cancel your account until there's some new content. Really? What's the point? It's surprising to see that Blizzard doesn't have all of these massive variances in the player base. Indeed, they might. They just might be hiding it from people. Who knows? It's perhaps true. So, my advice would be this: if you don't feel like you're getting value for money, just shelve it for a while, really. It's not going to go anywhere. We'll come back. But there's no point in paying for something that isn't giving you enjoyment. And yes, Blizzard have some responsibility there, but you also have the responsibility to draw the line when you believe you are not having fun and not simply play the game for the sake of playing the game. Self-perpetual silliness like that never gets you anywhere. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. I'm going to play some Datsuns for you. Yes, I do actually like this kind of music. It's pretty cool. It's pretty funky. Pretty groovy. Kind of standard garage rock. It's called Sitting Pretty. I'll be right back after this. Enjoy.